Welcome to Tampa Home Talk with your host, native Tampa real estate girl, Katrina Madewell, a full-time, passionate, out-of-the-box thinker, love for home ownership kind of realtor with over 21 years of combined mortgage and real estate experience. Tune in every week at this time for expert advice on everything you need to know about home ownership, finance, maintaining great credit, building wealth, and making your everyday life better, and how you can be financially successful today and tomorrow. Remember, love where you live or let Katrina fix it. Now, here's your host of Tampa Home Talk, Katrina Madewell.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us today for Tampa Home Talk. We have had an exciting week this week. The last couple days, I personally have spent myself in Tallahassee with several hundreds, if not into the thousands of other realtors from all over the country. And what we did was we went up and talked to senators, we talked to legislators about some of the key points that are really important in our state, one of those being flood insurance, which I know many of you are familiar with. And some of the other things are also with regards to housing matters, as far as like the Sadowski funds. We'll talk about that in a few minutes. And also sales tax on commercial leases and some other water issues. So we're going to go over some of those details here in the next hour. If you have any questions or you'd like to join us, our on-air number here at Tan Talk is 727-441-3000. We'd love to have you chime in if you'd like. First of all, the mission of our show here, I'd like to open the show with that, is really to just help clients keep and maintain good credit, live within their means, and build wealth. And when I say my team and I are passionate about it, we are absolutely passionate about it. And we want people to really love where they live. And if they don't, we'll be glad to help you fix it. Among other things, we are always trying to connect with the right people. And in this case, we're in Tallahassee talking to senators and legislators with regards to things that matter to homeowners and that matter to our state and things that are super important. So one of the things I really would like to talk about today is the property insurance, because this is a huge issue for a lot of people here in Pinellas County, as well as other areas across the state. I know myself personally encounter this on a daily basis in other parts of the state, like Pasco County, Hillsborough County, as well as Pinellas. So we'll go over some of those things. But one of the key talking points here that we discuss with legislators are the amount of flood insurance premiums paid by Floridians for every $1 basically paid back in return as a claim. And it's really unfair. We really want them to open up the state for a private pool of insurance carriers and whatnot. But Florida Association of Realtors, really, their efforts were to create a competitive and sustainable property insurance market, and they want that to continue. True reform really demands an approach that produces long-term solutions and that also fits a broad market needs and addresses the concerns of the consumers, businesses, and the industry groups. Some of the things that we're talking about is developing, again, a private insurance market alternative to the National Flood Insurance Program. And so we were urging some of our local senators, as well as some other people on a state level, to vote yes for Senate Bill 542. This was started by Senator Jeff Brantz. He's a Republican out of St. Pete. We also asked them to vote yes on House Bill 581 by Republican Larry Ahern. He's from Seminole. And then also HB 789 for Representative Ed Hooper, and he's right here out of the Clearwater area. Now, Congress is working right now to stop the wave of high insurance premiums that are a result from the stuff we've talked about in the past, the BW12 or the Biggert Waters Flood Insurance Act, Reform Act of 2012. Congress is currently considering reforming these that will bring some stability and certainty to much, much smaller rate increases compared to what we've seen. Florida's nearly $2 million of flood insurance policyholders, however, contribute significantly more. And this was from the old premiums, okay? So in the old premiums in the past that we paid so Florida homeowners, would pay on average $4 for every $1 that they claimed back. And for that reason, we were really asking the Florida lawmakers to continue seeking to provide regulatory framework that will attract private market alternatives to the National Flood Insurance Program and rates that will more accurately reflect risk. Some of these things that we have seen have been absolutely ridiculous. And I'm going to share a couple stories with you with regards to flood insurance, because I think those things are super important in this day and age right now. We also asked them to vote yes for House Bill 143 by Republican Jake Rayburn out of Valrico, and Senate Bill 346 by Senator Tom Lee. He's also a Republican out of Brandon. This will actually lengthen the amount of time property insurance companies have to pay assessments to the Florida Insurance Guarantee Association, which is FIGA. And FIGA is a nonprofit corporation that pays claims on behalf of insolvent insurance companies. So if your insurance company, your flood insurance company, actually goes under, this particular association helps ensure that you will get some type of repayment for, the flood insurance premiums that you've paid in. And so right now they're saying that FIGA does not have sufficient funds to pay claims when another insurance company goes bust. And part of that is because all of the right now it's one big pool of money nationwide. And so between Hurricane Katrina and Sandy and some of those other big storms, which really I don't think were rising water, it was like in the case of Katrina, it was a levee breach. So I don't think we're really comparing apples to apples here. But essentially, that's what it is. So FIGA can issue up to 2 types of assessments against solvent companies to raise funds, emergency and regular assessments. House Bill 143 and Senate Bill 346 would actually allow FIGA to collect assessments in monthly installments if it has enough funds to pay claims for 6 months or more. This is important to insurance companies considering writing policies in Florida because unexpected assessments reduce the company's surplus and the funds available to pay its own claims. So these bills do not alter the amount of potential assessments. Emergency and regular assessments remain capped at 2%, or the financial exposure for Floridians. So one of the most extreme cases I'll share with you, and this was a huge part of the reason why I decided to go with a bunch of other realtors in the Florida area to Tallahassee to really lobby for these things, is because we really need a much better flood reform than what we have now. And I don't think the National Flood Insurance Program is a viable option. Essentially, it doesn't make sense because we're lumped in with, people in the Mississippi area and in those areas that get flooded as a result of the Mississippi River. Granted, we're on a peninsula, but if you look at our track record and the hurricanes that we've had, it's, these new premiums we're seeing are not reflective of, rising water, which is what flood insurance pays for. And so one of my clients, they actually were purchasing a second home in the Hernando Beach area, and they were from the Green Bay area, and they actually came here. We had went through a couple properties, had issues with, different home inspections and non-permitted additions and all kinds of crazy stuff. So we finally found this one property that was great. I mean, it looked nice. It showed well. They didn't have to do a lot of stuff to it. It was just a really, really good match for them. So then we're getting through the process, and then, all of a sudden, this is shortly after BW12, which is the Bigger Water Reform Act of 2012, and we have to get a quote for flood insurance. So this is probably, I would say, midway through the process, which is still further in advance than what some other people do this. However, the problem was, one of the quotes that we got, and some of them really were all over the board, which is just nuts to me. But one of the quotes that we got was for $32,000 for 1 year worth of flood insurance premium. So think about that. $32,000. I can tell you that this was not a high-end property. This was not a property that was $500,000 or even $1 million. I mean, we're talking about a property that was very moderately priced in the 200 range, really low 200s. So really, in my humble opinion, with what I've experienced in my 22 years in the industry, I thought it was absolutely ridiculous that they would be getting premiums this high for something that just didn't even have a track record of flooding. So it's really just not fair what we're seeing here. And they really need to solve a much better issue than what we have here. So when you're talking about $32,000 a year, I mean, that's over $2,600 a month if you're escrowing. So you're putting $2,600 a month extra into your savings account for your taxes, insurance, flood. $2,600 per month would be just flood insurance. So needless to say, that was higher than the mortgage payment, significantly higher. It was higher than the mortgage payment, the taxes, the insurance, everything combined. So of course that pretty much kills the deal instantly. And then that market that's left, seeing premiums that high, they're left with cash buyers, which is a lot of the things that we're seeing here in the Pinellas market. Unfortunately, I don't know how, but the mortgage company did a great job just completely shopping it around. I know that the policy that they ended up getting was pretty much completely stripped. Like, it was just a mandatory policy with the highest deductible that one could have to simply meet the requirements of the mortgage company because flood insurance was required. However, the cheapest premium that we could find for that home was $9,000. So $9,000 for 1 year. So $750 per month as part of their mortgage payment goes to just flood insurance. And I know that they look at a number of things like your base flood elevation and that type of stuff to determine if you'll be in a flood zone or not. But really, it's ridiculous. And then, you take it to other extremes, which is a contract that we're working on right now. We actually just got it under contract. Flood insurance premium for that one, because this reform hasn't yet passed, or the adjustment, I should say, to the reform hasn't passed. Flood insurance for that property is $3,000 a year. And you're talking about something inland that's on a lake that's built up high enough that doesn't have a track record of flooding. So really, what we're seeing in these premiums are just ridiculous. So some of the things that are on the ballot or, on the bill right now in front of the House and the Senate are to essentially just, get private market insurance companies into Florida, minimize the, basically come up with another option besides the National Flood Insurance Program so that we can get some real risk type quotes and premiums for these homeowners. So that particular one, again, is $3,000 a year. So now the buyer's in a position that they can qualify with that, but I can tell you if they had been like the average buyer that we see that don't live well below their means, which again, that's one of our goals here is to help you live definitely within your means. But some people are smart and they actually live well below their means. And so that's who this couple was. And they loved the property. It was absolutely amazing. And I was happy to say that we finally got them under contract to purchase that. And we actually got into another whole story, which I'm going to go into after the break here shortly, but which gets into the shortage of properties right now on the market and, some of the advice I gave them as a buyer and essentially where we landed with that. So this is Katrina Madewell. You're listening to Tampa Home Talk. When we come back in a few minutes, we're going to go over some of the other bills that we talked about with legislators, sales tax on commercial leases, some of the water issues, and housing matters. So we're going to talk about the Sadowski funds. Be back in just a minute. Stick around. Thanks for rejoining us this afternoon here on Tampa Home Talk. I'm your host, Katrina Madewell with Charles Rutenberg Realty, and this is Tampa Home Talk. You can find us here every Thursday at 5 p.m. and also Saturday at 5 p.m. We're on 1340, 1350, and 1400. And you can also catch us out on tantalk1340.com. with streaming web video. In the prior segment, we were talking about some of the things that Florida Association of Realtors did in the Great American Realtor Days. We were lobbying in Tallahassee with legislators to go over some key points and issues that are really important in Florida. So I started with the number one topic that everyone has on their mind, and that's the flood insurance. So if you missed any part of today's show or the beginning part of the segment, please check us out. You can find us on a podcast. Just search for Tampa Home Talk, or on our website, tampahometalk.com, and then just check out the podcast there. from our prior shows. So I was sharing with you some stories that I had from clients with regards to some of these flood insurance premium nightmares, if you will. And I left off with a story of a client I'm currently working with. One of the things I thought I'd touch on, it's not flood related, but it's important. That was one of the things they considered, and maybe perhaps even one of the reasons why they didn't make an offer initially. But sometimes, when we start with clients, and this was a buyer, and the very first home that we saw was the one. It doesn't always happen like that, but sometimes it does. And this was the house. And so, obviously I'm not an in-your-face kind of agent. I give the people time to make their own decisions. We got them some information regarding the flood, sent them information from the listing agent that they had already gotten because they had prior contracts that had fallen through. They got an elevation certificate and got some of those premium quotes. And so that was the reason why this house hadn't sold. But I can tell you it was beautiful on the lake, absolutely move-in ready, and you couldn't touch the price with a 2-foot pole. So I just told them, I said, sometimes it's just the one. And they talked to their parents. I said, yeah, they told us that when they bought their last house too, the very first one they saw was the one. So I think it made a little more sense for them because they hadn't moved in a while, but they were kind of slow to make a decision. And like I told them, don't wait too long because the market that we're in, I know it's active now, but we're seeing a lot of buyer activity, especially as we're getting into the spring market here. The states up north have had a horrible, crazy, cold, snow, blistery winters. And it's really played a part in some of the people that we have coming from up north buying properties here in Florida. So what happens is the people like them that are, they have small kids or looking for a larger, more spacious home. When they go to actually, look at a property and you're a little bit slower to make a decision, you might have people that are here for a week and they've been here before on vacation and they've been looking at properties online and they're going to schedule a few things when they get here and they already know they're going to make a decision to put in an offer and buy a property. They just might not know which one. So you just have to keep that in mind if you're a buyer out looking right now. So what happened was we were going back to the property to show it to their children and their parents because they hadn't yet seen it. And when the buyer got there, I was coming from another property kind of far away. So they beat me to the property and the seller basically told them that they weren't going to show the property because they already had a contract on the house. So I jumped in there, called the listing agent, and just wanted to verify that that was actually true and it wasn't an offer, that they were still negotiating the details on. Because once it's a contract, then you have no other options but to go in as a backup. And I could tell the husband was really disappointed when I told him that there was a contract on the house. So I dug a little bit deeper, pushed the issues a little more, and then the next thing you know, there was another offer that came in because I had come in the night before we were there, and now they were in a situation of competing with a multiple offer. And sometimes it's more than one. And, this was a Monday. We had just looked at the house or had just looked at some other homes rather that Saturday, a couple days before. And I told him, I said, I don't want to push you, but just keep that in mind. If someone else makes an offer, you're going to be then competing against multiple offers. So a lot of times just indecisiveness can cause you to actually pay more because sometimes when you see what else is on the market and then you compare that to the one that's the one and you realize that it's the one, by the time you make a decision, sometimes, someone else has already made that decision. So just keep that in mind. If you're out looking around for properties, if you're with us, we're certainly going to give you that information as well because we want you to make a good informed decision and, just basically have that information. The next thing we're going to go into, and we got Cedric back here producing the show today, so feel free to chime in because I hate talking to myself.
I know.
So one of the things we talked about was the Sadowski funds available for the 2014, 2015. What they do is they put stuff on and they pass it for a certain amount of time. Then once that time is up, they can either pass it to extend, redo it, or table it for another time. And so essentially, one of the things that Florida Realtors was really pushing, and again, we advocate homeownership. It's a really, really big important part to realtors that have the core beliefs just like me. They stand for what matters as far as housing and home ownership and people not being homeless. And so the Sadowski Fund it's a fund that's built into some of the taxes that, buyers pay to basically go towards different things. I'll sum it up with the thing that Florida Realtors gave me, but, housing matters and to the elderly on fixed incomes and low income families. There's tens of thousands of Floridians here, and many of them have school-age children. Okay, when I say school-age children, just imagine this picture in your mind. I mean, I have children that range in the ages of 8 years old 10 years old, soon to be 11, and 13, almost 14. So I just imagine if I were one of those families and we literally had no place to call home. And, you know, some of these families are scared. They don't want to report to the schools that they don't have a place to live, or maybe they're living in their car, or they're staying with friends, or whatever. And they don't want Child Protective Services involved, so they're scared. And many of them don't say anything. I know there's a couple people that live in my neighborhood that I help out personally, and I do it because I care and I want to, and I understand the position they're in. And these are people that work. They're everyday people, but they just don't, you know, make enough to make ends meet. You know, one of the gals that I help out, her husband left her and she's by herself raising 2 boys. So they want to dedicate all the monies collected from the Sadowski Affordable Housing Trust Fund, and that's what it is, it's a trust fund, for its intended purpose, which is housing. And they also want to reduce the amount. So they're asking them. So the documentary state tax stamps charged on the fund. So they increased it by 10 cents back in, I think, 2012. And so they're asking them to either reduce the amount of doc stamps that the buyers will pay when they buy a property, because part of this money is set aside for a fund to help people with down payment assistance and a number of different programs like that. They're asking them to either reduce that or actually make these funds available to people. And if you saw the number of people in Florida that don't have a home, it's crazy. It's like, I forget the number, but it was like 437,000. It's an astounding number. It's really shocking. In 1992, realtors strongly supported an increase in documentary tax stamps on the deed for real estate transactions by 10 cents. This is what I mentioned to you. So it's basically 10 cents per $100 of value if all monies collected went to housing programs. And it hasn't been the case since 2002. So what's happened is, the higher ups and, on the Florida level have actually used the money for other things. And so that's not what this trust fund was set up for. And we would like to make them, either take that money away from the buyers that are paying it or put it back into the trust fund so that it's available for people that want down payment assistance and, maybe they're buying their first home. So think back to that place, when you bought your first home. I know the buyers that we work with, if they're eligible for down payment assistance, they certainly appreciate it. We have a buyer that, the down payment assistance has helped her, and it's, she's got some money saved, but sometimes it's just enough to get them where they want to be. And what we find is their mortgage payment actually is less than what they're paying in rent.
Yeah, that's not surprising.
Isn't that exciting though? I mean, and the rates are so low. Why not? So this is some of the things that Florida Association of Realtors lobbies for. We really want to, get this money back to the buyers. This trust fund is for that. So during the years of state budget shortfalls, again, the legislators swept the Sadowski monies in the trust fund and put it into general revenue to basically surplus shortfalls and other things. So this is the year we want to put the trust back into the affordable housing trust funds. These funds can be put to work right now to fund housing programs for the homeless, which is huge. We really would love to see that be a good temporary solution to help those people get back on their feet. Florida Realtors asked them to support legislation sponsored by Senator Jack Latvala. He's a Republican out of the Clearwater area, and also Republican Kathleen Peters. She is from St. Petersburg. That would direct a portion of the Sadowski funds to the Department of Children and Families for homelessness programs. Now, for 2011 and 2012 school year, Florida's public school identified 63,685 students as homeless. And so this doesn't even take into consideration the other people that I mentioned that are afraid to say anything. So they're out there too. They're just not counted in those numbers. As a state, we can do better for future generations of Floridians. So we were asking them to vote yes for Senate Bill 1090 and House Bill 979. So you can reach out to your local politicians and ask them to also vote yes for Senate Bill 1090 and House Bill 979. We also wanted them to provide down payments and closing cost assistance to some of our public service workers public service workers, okay? So our teachers, our firefighters, our first responders, and others who serve our communities. We had a lot more of those funds available for those public service workers in the past. And what we found is a lot of those programs and down payment assistance programs have basically just phased off. So if you know a firefighter or a teacher, first responder, you guys should be reaching out to your local representatives and really pushing this bill to also pass and say yes, because that trust fund money needs to come back to the Sadowski Trust Fund. We also want them to help, and this will help a lot of elderly families as well, rehabilitate their existing houses and their apartments in dire need of repairs. I know that we all know someone that is an elderly person that maybe is living off of a fixed income such as Social Security, and they just don't have the extra monies in their budget to make those regular homeowner repairs. And so they fall into deferred home maintenance. And a lot of times that deferred home maintenance can just continue year after year after year. And then, it's like with anything. If it's a small problem and it grows, essentially it's just going to get bigger. So homes for elderly, persons with disabilities who might otherwise live in an institutional setting. We want them to help those type of folks. There's other reasons to dedicate all the Sadowski monies towards housing jobs. $291 million are available for housing programs for year 2014 and 2015. And we'd like to create more than 27,000 jobs by voting yes to these bills. And it would add $3.4 billion to our Florida economy. How does that sound?
Sounds pretty good.
So we big advocates for that type of stuff. And I got to tell you, for me to take 2 days out of my schedule and travel to Tallahassee was not fun. But when you get there and you meet these legislators and these senators face to face, and you're telling them some of these real problems that we have in the field, and I shared the story about the $32,000 flood insurance. I mean, I have clients with real names and addresses. I can share that with them and say, these are real people that we see every day face to face that it affects. And I got to tell you, some of the people that we connected with were absolutely awesome. And so I'll probably reach out to them and see if we can get them on the show in the future, because a lot of them thanked us for bringing this information to them, because they don't know if we don't tell them. So we really encourage you to reach out to your elected officials and let them know what's important to you, because they're elected by us. And so the stuff that's important to you needs to be important to them, and the good ones care about that.
Good.
So also the other thing too, and this I think you'll find as a surprise because I didn't know this, Florida is the only state in the union that charges a tax on commercial leases. Did you know that?
I did not.
So, for example, businesses that we try to bring into in some of the neighboring states that we actually compete with, like Georgia, Alabama, I mean, those are all states, North Carolina, we're competing with these other states to bring businesses here. And you can bet that if businesses are looking to relocate in those other states, those realtors that are selling those commercial leases are selling the fact that, oh, you don't want to do it in Florida because they have a tax on their commercial leases.
So is that going to go away at any point in time? Or?
Well, since we're the only one that actually charges that, that's one of the other 4 key points that we were bringing up to the legislators in Tallahassee. We wanted to bring new companies to Florida. And we believe that if we can abolish this tax, that it really isn't fair, that it will essentially help bring some of those companies to Florida. It'll provide jobs. It will build a strong community and generate tax revenues. It's also critical to our state's growth and economic development. So one's the loneliest number, right? So to be the only state that does this. Particularly when you're trying to attract new businesses here to the state. I know everybody wants new businesses here. And we're the only state in the country that charges the sales tax on commercial leases. It's ridiculous in my opinion. I don't even know how it got passed.
And, do you have any idea how much money that they claim that this is bringing in?
Let me see here. I don't have that, but I've got some other stats.
Okay.
They were saying basically for Florida to be competitive with these other states and online retailers and considered as a business-friendly perspective place for employers and companies seek to relocate here, and we hope a lot of them do after the crazy winter they've had up north.
Yeah.
We have to start to phase out this tax on these commercial leases. So compared to other states, Florida ranks number 36 in attracting new businesses from a tax perspective. So according to the 2012 survey by Site Selection, we rank number 20 in competitiveness and number 10 in overall, well behind neighboring states like Georgia, Alabama, and other southeastern states like North Carolina, etc. As commercial lease sales tax, it shouldn't be a deal breaker for companies looking to relocate here to Florida. And in the first year, a complete repeal of the tax would create 185,000 new jobs and $20 billion in economic impact. So there's a number for you, Cedric. It's $20 billion that it would bring to the economy here in Florida.
Wow.
That's 5 times more than the tax revenue impact. And so that is Senate Bill 176. And we were asking them to vote yes on Senate Bill 176 and support Senator Dorothy Huskill from Port Orange and House Bill 11 by Republican Greg Steube out of Sarasota to lower the commercial lease sales tax from 6 to 5%. So they're saying right now, hey, let's lower it beginning in 2014 from 6% to 5%. And eventually we'd like to see them completely phase that out since, again, we're the only state in the union that has that.
Wow.
So some of the other things that we talked about were water issues. And we're going to get into that in just a few minutes after we take a break. We got a break for a commercial here. But you're listening to Tampa Home Talk. This is your host, Katrina Madewell. Thanks so much for tuning in today on 1340, 1350, and 1400 Tan Talk Radio Network. We're affiliated with Real Estate Radio Network, and we're glad to have you today listening to our show. If you missed any part of it, please catch it on our website, TampaHometalk.com, and all of our shows are available via a podcast. We'll be back in just a minute. So much for joining us this afternoon at Tampa Home Talk. I'm your host, Katrina Madewell with Charles Ruttenberg Realty. You're listening to Real Estate Radio Network on Tan Talk 1340, 1350, and 1400. So some of the things we were discussing in our prior segments were some of the important issues that we brought to our local legislators, or I should say Tallahassee. So state legislators, state officials that have the power to vote yes or no on certain things to really help homeowners, help everyday home buyers, and just different things that matter to Florida, things that matter to homeowners. I can tell you that Florida Association of Realtors and National Association of Realtors is a very, very strong lobby in Washington on a local level, on a state level, and we are always advocating what is best for home ownership, what's best for homeowners, what is best to help them protect their property rights. It's really important to me, and it's really important to many of the Florida realtors I know, and that's part of the reason why we support RPAC and, pay the dues and all of that stuff. So if you missed any part of the show, please catch us on the web at TampaHometalk.com. You'll be able to see our prior show there. And we also put them on a podcast. And then we're across the web on Facebook and Twitter at Tampa Home Talk. So some of the things we discussed in the prior segments was the flood insurance, how basically the amount of flood insurance premiums paid in by Floridians is $4 for every $1 that comes back in claims. So we want them to open up that private market. We also talked about the Sadowski Fund. It's a trust fund set aside to help homeowners and help people that want to be homeowners by way of down payment assistance and different things like that. We also are asking them to reduce the amount of tax on commercial leases. So we're asking them to really, take it from 6 to 5%, and then eventually we'd like to push to have that abolished because we're the only state that has a tax on commercial leases. So it makes us uncompetitive from a business perspective when people want to relocate here to Florida. The other thing that we wanted to talk to our legislators about was some of the water issues. And this can be a huge problem here in Florida when we start running into the dry seasons, because we'll have seasons where we get a ton of rain, and then other seasons where, we're in a drought, we have to watch our water, and there's water restrictions and that type of stuff. But there's 11,000 miles of rivers and streams and waterways in the Florida state. Did you know that, Cedric?
I did not.
It's a pretty big number. I didn't know that either, so I was glad to learn that. As the legislator lays the groundwork for basically comprehension statewide water plan, which is stuff they're working on now. Realtors wanted them to know what is important to millions of property owners who are drawn to the state's natural beauty, and they call Florida home. So some of the things that attract people to not only visit and live here are our beaches, the fishing, just all the natural wildlife, the weather. I mean, there's so many things that attract people here to Florida. It's just beautiful year round. Not to mention the theme parks. I mean, the list really, we could write a list for days on the things we have to do here in Florida. Water quality should be really important here in Florida as well. And so Florida Realtors supported programs to keep our springs, lakes, and other bodies free of harmful pollutants and toxins and that type of stuff. Any approach to manage these levels should be science-based and comprehensive. So it should have, obviously, a study that's finished and that type of stuff. Completion of the Department of Health's on-site sewage nitrogen reduction strategies study, which is ongoing now. It's necessary to understand how on-site wastewater systems work in different areas of the state. So they're trying to focus, their main focus of this particular study is the new passive technology used in on-site wastewater systems and septic tanks. So that's really, has a lot to do with septic tanks, but they were asking them to support a $650,000 in funding to complete the Department of Health Florida's on-site sewage nitrogen reduction strategy study. So they're almost finished. The study's in the final phase, and they needed $650,000 to complete it. So we were asking the state to support that because the study is in its final stage, and it simply just required an extension of time and the remainder of money to fulfill the original contract. So this is not a bill, but it's something that we were asking them to support. And there's some areas of the state that are absolutely starved for fresh water, and they're looking for alternative sources. And while others may suffer through dry months, only to be inundated during the rainy season with more water than sensitive ecosystems can handle. It's been the case for nearly a decade in the Indian River Lagoon and also the Lake Okeechobee Basin. So when waters in Lake Okeechobee rise to dangerous levels, what happens is the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers has to release that excess water. And a lot of times this excess water that gets released, it pollutes with toxic algae into nearby rivers and estuaries. So these are some of the many things, again, that attract people here. So one of their points was there's many tracts of land around Lake Okeechobee where that homeowners own, where excess water could actually be stored by Florida legislator and water management districts. And we were asking them for the authority to actually pay landowners. So there's not a house or anything on it. There's just adjacent land near, for example, Lake Okeechobee. We were asking them to pay them, the government to pay them for the use of their land so they could store that water there, clean it up, and so forth. So they're asking them to fund alternative storage options that alleviate some, if not all, of these disastrous outflows. So a comprehensive, well-funded, managed statewide water policy, it'll begin to turn the tide, obviously, on this crisis that's been just decades in the making. I mean, it really has been. Together, we're hoping to restore one of the state's greatest assets, which is our waterways, our fresh waterways. So you're listening to Tampa Home Talk. This is Katrina Madewell. I'm your host. We'll be here every Thursday at 5 p.m., every Saturday at 5 p.m. Our goal is to share with you timely, market-appropriate information, things to help make your everyday life better. If you're already a homeowner or you want to be a homeowner, we'd love to have a part of that. And so our mission of our show is to bring you things to help you obtain and keep good credit, live within your means, build wealth, things that matter to homeowners. And we want you to love where you live. And if you don't, we can fix it. So, there's a lot of little things that I want to share, and I'll try to put together little stories every week because we see stuff every day. Like, there are things that when I'm in the field are second nature to me. Like, I can just answer them. I just do it. I know the answer. So, for example, one of our clients did a home inspection last week. One of the things we see, like in probably 9 out of 10 home inspections, is what they call wood decay, fungi, which is an invitation for termites that like that. They're not, wood destroying organisms or like wood eating termites, but they like that real wet, moist areas.
Yeah.
So a lot of times, since houses are not required to have rain gutters or any of that stuff, essentially what happens is there's usually a little patio or a concrete area outside those side garage doors. So when water comes off the roof and just splatters onto those concrete areas, it splashes back onto the door and those low areas towards the ground. And a lot of times we'll see those areas actually rotten out. And so it's not things that, buyers would look at or notice when they're walking through, but it's something that we see on probably 9 out of 10 home inspections.
Wow. And
just a lot of little things like that we see every day. And so we like to just share those stories because some of them are normal, some of them are big. We've had some people on our show in the past talk about cracking and normal settling, what's normal, what's not, what you should have a structural engineer look at, what you shouldn't, what you should. And so, we just want to make sure people make good, informed decisions.
So when you're selling a home and you see these things, how do you deal with that? What do you do?
Really, it's a simple fix. Like, for example, that garage issue that I talked about, like you have the frame around the door. And essentially what happens is they go in, they cut off the wood part there, literally just saw it off, replace it with a new fresh piece of wood, patch it, repaint it, and seal it with a good water repellent type paint, like an exterior paint that you'd use on the outside, and it keeps the water from repelling. The best source is to have gutters or something away from it. We see it a lot on the bottom of the garage doors, that same thing. But what you don't want is that wood to just constantly rot out and be an invitation for wood decay fungi, which is, those type of termites.
So I know nothing about this. That's why I'm asking. So when you're selling a house, do you recommend to the owner that they should take care of these problems before they actually put it on the market?
What we do, and today before I actually came to the studio, I had a listing appointment. So I went in, and it was an elderly lady. She's been in her house for almost 30 years. It was actually in an area where I grew up. And so what happened was she said, hey, my husband, passed away several years ago, and she's just at a place where she's ready to move on. She's ready to be around people of her age. She's ready to travel a little bit, try some different places. And so she said, can you do a walkthrough with me and what's next? So we have to oftentimes, when we're looking at a seller and helping them prepare their house to get into the market, go in and help them prepare not only mentally, but physically. Okay. So when people sell their house, we have to make that transition from a home to a house. So, when you live in it and you make it your own and you add your personal pictures and you add your personal pictures and belongings and touches and paint, that's what makes it a home. And so we try to, redo that and undo it and basically take away the personal photos, all of those things. Because when a buyer goes to look through their house, for one, the seller always should leave. If you're listening right now and you're a seller and you don't vacate your home for showings, you're really missing a huge opportunity. Because what happens is, you imagine this, right? Think about this. If you were to sell your home, okay, and someone comes in your home and you're there, or just spin it around if you're the buyer and you're walking through a prospective home that you want to buy and the homeowner's there, how are you going to feel? You want to open the cabinets and look under the kitchen sink, and you want to look at the pantry to see how much room you have in there to store food.
Yeah, I understand that, but also isn't the prospective buyer going to want to ask some questions of the homeowner?
That's a good question, because actually sometimes when that happens and the seller's there, you get into very dangerous territories.
Really?
Like sometimes, the best analogy I can use is, how attorneys, when they go to court or they're trying to defend someone, whether it's criminal, civil, whatever, they're going to look at the statutes of the law. They're going to know all the things they can do, the things they can't do. And then one of the things you never see is them talking to each other, right? The attorneys are always there. The attorneys are always there to make sure that their client doesn't say anything to put their foot in their mouth.
Right.
Okay.
That does make sense.
So think about it from that perspective. We as agents would not want our clients to say anything that could jeopardize their position, and people do. So sometimes, I'm going to find out what my client's most deepest personal reasons are for moving, but you don't want a buyer asking them that question, because if they find out that they're desperate to sell, what are they going to do?
Run the other direction, probably.
No, or they'll make a lowball offer if they like the house. So essentially, they're cheating, my client, if it's my listing, out of monies that they're due.
Right.
So we want to make sure that doesn't happen, and we just protect them in their best interest. So that's a huge reason why we don't like them together until we're working out all the bugs. Once it's in contract and it's in writing, sure, we'll ask questions. Sure, come to closing, meet each other. It's great. But you want to try to not... We help alleviate a lot of problems. Like, a lot of people don't realize what realtors do. Mm-hmm. We do a lot more. A good realtor will do a lot more than stick a sign in the yard, put a lockbox on the door, and put it for sale in the MLS. There's so many more things that go into the scope of what we do. And so we want the homeowners to vacate, because it's a, people, when they go into the home, if the seller's there, they're going to feel really uncomfortable. They're going to feel like they're in somebody else's house. But if they're not there and there's no pictures on the wall, they're going to look at it and they're going to say, I like this. This is really cozy. And then they start looking at where the fireplace is. And then they imagine, sometimes they'll sit on the couch and imagine sitting in that room after work. Could they be comfortable? And where would their furniture go? They start imagining these things in their mind. So essentially, that's what we want them to do. And if the homeowner's there, you think they're just going to walk in and sit on the couch?
No.
They're not going to do it. But that's the stuff we really want them to do. We want them to open the cabinets. We want them to look in the closets. We want them to do all those silly little things, because that's what matters. So every week, we're going to share with you some fantastic stories and answer some questions like that. And I'll try to grab things from our Twitter stream at Tampa Home Talk, or my personal is Tampa Homes. And we'll pull some questions off there, and I'll be happy to answer them on the air. And we'll respond to you via Twitter or Facebook at Tampa Home Talk. Feel free to connect with us on the web as well at tampahometalk.com. And don't forget to catch us here at Tan Talk 1340, 1350, and 1400 every Thursday and Saturday at 5 p.m. So for this week, we must say farewell. It's been a great show. Thank you for joining me, Cedric, and chiming in a little bit.
I enjoyed it.
But for this week, we'll have to let you go, and we are out.